Hello, everybody. Come on in. Please be seated somewhere. I don't know why I'm saying that. Welcome to the Brooklyn Rails Wednesday afternoon reading series. We've got a fabulous reading for you today. The title of today's reading is Roots and Routes, Inheriting the Black South, a rail reading curated by Irene Vázquez. Irene will be reading along with Ashia Ajani and Karisma Price, and I'll introduce Irene in just a second. First, I'll just say a few words about the series and the rail. For starters, this is the 130th Wednesday poetry reading and the 787th episode of the new social environment. It's questionable as to whether you can use the word new after 787 episodes, but I guess new things can last a long time. I'm just saying things like that because I always want to tease our publisher, Fong, and see if he'll fire me for messing around with the name. If you're here at the reading for the first time, you might want to pay attention to the chat as we go through. There will be information posted on the readers and their various endeavors and publications, along with some basic information on the Brooklyn Rail. My name is Anselm Berrigan. I'm the poetry editor, and I work with the good folks here on this series, Eleanor and Chloe and Carolyn in particular. I'm really grateful to Irene for putting this reading together. I will introduce Irene, and then Irene will take it from there. Irene Vázquez is a Black Mexican-American poet and journalist based in Hoboken, which is in New Jersey, who writes at the intersection of Black cultural work, placemaking, and the environment. Their debut chapbook, Take Me to the Water, was released by Bloof Books in October 2022. It is sold out, but there may be ways to get copies, perhaps electronic copies. But as with submissions to the Brooklyn Rail, you just got to figure out who to talk to work that one out. Irene works at Levine Querido, editing books about feisty 12-year-olds, and this past spring was named a Brooklyn Poets Fellow for Study in Bernard Ferguson's workshop. In 2021, with the support of the Pulitzer Center, Irene reported on environmental justice advocacy and healing in Black and Indigenous communities on the Louisiana coast. Irene's a Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominated writer, has had poems in Brooklyn Rail within the last year. When not writing, Irene likes drinking coffee, watching the WNBA, and reminding folks that the South has something to say. Please welcome Irene to the Brooklyn Rail reading series.
Hey, y'all. Thank you, Anselm, for inviting me to curate this reading. It's one of those things that I never expected to be asked to do. And then immediately when I get asked, I'm like, well, I know two people immediately that I wanted to invite, and two people that I think are some of the most fantastic people writing today who have books out this year. And I just wanted to put you all on to some amazing folks. So I'll go ahead and read, and then I'll introduce each of them. It'll be me, and then Karisma, and then Ashia. And then we'll chat for a little bit after we read our poems. So I'm really excited also to get to talk to them about their work, because again, it's fantastic. But I'll be reading some poems from my chapbook, Take Me to the Water. It came out in October of last year. Allegedly, my parents have some extra copies. So if you really want a physical copy, I can probably get you one that's like in my parents' closet someplace. But we did sell out of the print run, so. This first poem is called Freehanding Maps of the Gulf. If I'm being honest, yes, I want you to love me. My skin doesn't know how to breathe here. I forget I'm near the ocean until I hear the seagulls wail. I've been loved by a people who call you baby at first glance. I was born in the kind of history that smacks you in the face. Come springtime, pollen descends on the windshield and doorknobs. These days, not even winter can stop disaster. I'm so tired of loving her from other stars. Baby, here is what I have to offer you. The high water mark in the yellow house, the shutter that opens wonky after it flew off in 2005, the sweat stains in all my clothes that won't wash out. Could you love it? Could you learn to? Because I've seen the moon rise over the Mississippi. There is only one place for me to go. That's poem 1. My bio doesn't mention this, mostly because I have not found a good way to phrase the fact that I was born in New Orleans, but I didn't spend most of my life there. I was born in New Orleans. We moved after Katrina, spent most of my life in Houston. I've not lived in the South. Well, I lived in the South briefly during the early pandemic days with my parents. I live in Hoboken now, spitting distance from the Hudson River. But the South lives within me, and I hope to move back there one day. A lot of these poems are about that, and part of why I brought this selection of writers together today. So this next poem I wrote, the first poem chronologically that I wrote in this collection, and I wrote it when I want to say it was Hurricane Laura. We thought it was going to hit Houston, and then it hit a little bit further east and ended up hitting New Orleans in August of 2020. It's called The Black Shoals, and the title is taken from Tiffany Lafabo King's Black feminist scholars book of the same name. Swallow me whole, O beast of the southern radar, patron of the disaster zone of the unsurvivable storm surge, O surveiller of our anxieties, the drowning foretold. Here we are in another August of hot darkness, another storm ravaging the Black Shoals, and I'm told the map isn't even accurate anymore. The coastline has eroded so much that Louisiana is no longer a boot shape, our shores more saltwater than Homestead, and I click through headlines on Twitter like it's all new. But my lungs were declared a disaster zone long ago. My people have wandered and were lost refugees in their own country, their homes named uninhabitable long before the storm even hit. I've spent my life flinching at the slightest crack of thunder, but it is August, 3 months into a national uprising, 400 plus years into a people's apocalypse, 20 days after a man was shot in the back 7 times in Wisconsin, and I'm tired of telling people that these are natural disasters. 3 years ago, when the last storm hit, I might have told you that every 500 years someone must bear the sins of a people, but in the years since my hands first began to shake, I learned who and what and where is responsible, and as the storm spins in the radar, I watch colonization unfold in real time. Maybe climate change spins whiteness into stacks of cumulonimbus, as the eye of the storm intensifies with each degree stacked in the Gulf, each tick moves upward on the stock exchange. Tell me, someone didn't dream up this deluge, this clearing of land, uninhabitable, contaminated. Tell me who has the right to remain. Tell me without flinching that my life matters. Truth be told, the storm isn't even the half of it. Ain't nothing new about our lands declared uninhabitable, cleared for industrial use, for flume and flare, for fire and brimstone. This place, the only one where we were allowed to reside, refineries, petrochemical infestations have taken hold in our homelands, and in the days before natural disaster, they unleashed one man-made all on their own. Here, our bodies marked in yellow tape, uninhabitable, flooding the lungs of our communities with the smoke from their stacks. Oh, Our Lady of Perpetual Fever Dreams, our asphalt sovereign, mother of ozone action days and asthmatic breath. Behold how the men have partitioned our city, sliced and diced until all that is left is to worry and wait. We were never meant to survive. And ain't that some shit? Ain't that something holy in all this mudbound? Ain't that some Black life? For still I sit here loving you, blessed city of perpetual rain cloud, we who have kept on keeping on, pressing towards the mark. We brought here to these Black shoals long before the storms came. We who will keep the land long after our captors are gone. That was Black Shoals. This next poem I wrote for my grandma. My mom's family is originally from Southern Alabama. My grandma still lives there. And I talk about Katrina as my villain origin story of how I got into doing EJ work and writing poetry and all that good stuff. But my family's history with environmental racism, of course, goes back before Katrina. My mother grew up in Monroeville, Alabama, a small town. And my grandfather passed away before I was born, colon cancer, very aggressive form. And there's a cancer cluster in Monroeville, attributed to the Vanity Fair paper mill plant. And my grandma didn't trust the water anymore. So this poem is for her, called Heaven is a Muddy River. Mama stopped drinking the water after Daddy passed. She gets it delivered now, of Zarka in big jugs. She was given a truth, an insurance check, turned it over and over in the nights unmoving, like a precious relic, like a polished stone. States away, I still sleepwalked to the riverbank, begged to relive even the barest mornings, the time catching trout, Cassie snagged my arm with her fish hook, harvesting the June tomatoes, his steamboat laugh, even the nights I'd hear him praying for a son. My daughter only knows his charcoal outline, the rubbings of a grave. I tell her stories of how she was born, sculpted from stardust and red clay. In the dream, undone promises fog up the marshland and the river is frozen over as though I'm ready to forgive. I know it's just as hard in heaven, but I still want to swim. Got two more long poems that I'll read, and then I'll close out with a short one. This poem's called Atlántico. My hairdresser tells me, los hombres puertorriqueños no sirven para nada, and I do not listen. Press my hair, book a flight, buy a new red lipstick from Walgreens. The first day I see him, I wear my favorite white linen sundress, accidentally flash a parking lot attendant. At the bar before I meet him, I read poetry, order a mango whiskey sour, pretend that this is my life, something that I do on a regular basis. Before I meet him, Lupe saying, I had a dream that there's another woman. Call me as soon as you get this. I can't get the memory of you crying out of my head, and I do not listen to the voicemail. I meet him in the parking lot of the bar and he bursts into a smile, takes my suitcase, which I love because sometimes I get tired of caring for myself. He says, what are you working on? And do you remember how we said we'd get our ears pierced together? And you've always been so capable. And this is Julissa, my girlfriend. She's meeting us for dinner. And I think, Ave Maria Purísima, he has done it again. But I go to dinner. I laugh. I allow myself all our memories because I know this will be the last time. The 3 days are a blur. Taxi cabs, museums, long walks around the campus where they study, I eat. Sometimes vomit it up because it's too rich and this island's bacteria do not know me yet. And the last night I sit him down on the too small, sterile Airbnb couch. Night had fallen outside. He wants to make sure I have cash for the cab to the airport. And I ask, who claims you? I keep asking, and who do you claim? Because I cannot be responsible for this anymore. This $30 oversized baggage charge, all this money I could have spent on books or flood insurance. Over and over, I hear myself saying, you've done this again and again, treated me like our promises meant something. Like you held my hand when I was 19 and couldn't handle my liquor. Like you cared that I was Black and you were Black and we both saw the only cities that ever loved us back blown apart and everything else is hard enough, so love shouldn't be. And as he's telling me he doesn't understand, I see a rivulet of water whisper under the crack of the door, then a stream begins to trickle from the bathroom upstairs. And as I'm saying, you've made me feel like I've made a mistake trusting you, which I cannot forgive. The door bursts down, the waters rush in, and the couch floats out the window. I nearly smack my head on the door jamb on the way out, and egret glides above us, and the conches are saying something I cannot comprehend, but that vibrates like memory. And before I can panic, I listen. And I sense that I can get home from here, that this too is my ocean. And after everything, the memory of the mango whiskey sour isn't spoiled. And all I learned about the law is that it cannot tell you what is wrong or right, but water always knows what it's doing. So next time it floods, I am building my boat. This next one is probably my favorite in its collection. It's called Hot House, or the Taking Back of the Provision Grounds. I don't mean to alarm you, but we are not alone in our bodies. I don't mean to erase your agency, but we are less bodies than botanical gardens, less individuals than a collection of holy sacraments. What I mean is, I recently found out there are trillions of microorganisms in the gut alone, bacteria, viruses, and fungi, more than the number of human cells in the entire body. I mean, I always had a sneaking suspicion we exceeded this anatomy, sustained by something simpler and perhaps closer to God, something more ancient that knows no name, something passed down, more precious than property. So fuck off, Big Pharma. These is ours. We grew them ourselves, or rather made of the body a hothouse, gave them a place to go where they live collectively and rent-free. When I'm lonely in this pandemic existence we've begun to call a life, I imagine them all misfrizzled up in my digestive system on a magic school bus ride and the twists and turns of my intestine. I hope they laugh up in there and it makes me gassy. I hope they snort like my best friend Maddie. I hope they ring out when they've won an argument like Sid. I hope they throw groovy parties up in my gut like Caroline. In other words, I hope they like to boogie, engaging whatever kind of unicellular motion floats their little bacterial boat. As I write this poem, I imagine them nourished by my late afternoon snack or whatever leftovers I eat standing in my kitchen as long as I'm here, anthropomorphizing bacteria that are not aware I have a consciousness. Let me just say, our microbiome has done more for us than any president ever had, which is to say, kept us alive on purpose. Dare I say that our bacteria know that race is a fiction, but they too have seen some shit go down in the provision grounds. They've known poison waters that preceded us, and they will be better prepared for whatever future that is to come. When I'm at my lowest, I hear them calling to us, oh, our children of Louisiana silt, Delta babies, unbought and unbossed, we wish you mud and muck. From your mothers we were formed, guiding you through our journey back to the earth, to the mud. One day we will return both beyond and because of you. But here in the poem, we can be anything, so we synthesized vitamins and gave you rhythm, broke down simple carbohydrates and sent you moxie. We pushed and pulled you to the beat of our ancestors to give you this, the God body. So when we eat now, we eat sacrament. When we live now, we live garden. When we fuck and jump and sleep soundly in the night, we are bountiful. We are multiple. We are home. I love that poem. One more short one, then I'll introduce Karisma. This one's called There Will Be No Evening. Just listen how it's raining. What is God if not endless becoming, flesh made word again, rue burning on the stove? What is becoming if not endless fear? Just listen how it's raining. This is all we have. Thank you. And thank you all for coming to our virtual reading. I now have the distinct pleasure of introducing Karisma Price. I first came across Karisma's work in one of the January Poem-a-Day with her poem Castnet Seafood, which I feel like there's some poems that I read and I read them and I think to myself, now I have to go and read every single thing that this person has written. And that's how I felt when I read that poem. So I will read Karisma's bio so we can hear her read. Karisma Price is an assistant professor of English at Tulane University. A poet, screenwriter, and media artist, she's the author of I'm Always So Serious, which came out from Sarabande Books earlier this year. Her work has appeared in publications including Poetry, Indiana Review, the Oxford American, Four-Way Review, and the Academy of American Poets Poem-a-Day series, and elsewhere. She's a Cave Canem Fellow, was a finalist for the 2019 Manchester Poetry Prize, and was awarded the 2020 J. Howard and Barbara M.J. Wood Prize from the Poetry Foundation. A native New Orleanian, she holds an MFA from poetry from NYU, where she was a Writers in the Public Schools Fellow. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Karisma.
Hi, everybody. How we doing? I am very, very happy to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. It's great reading about the South. And, you know, I'm born and raised in New Orleans, like my bio said. So, yeah, it's so funny that you said the South got something to say in your bio, because that's one of the epigraphs to my book. So I'm going to read a few poems. I'm going to start with two new ones, and then I'll read some from the book. I'm gonna start with the Castnet Seafood poem. So this one was written, it's for my Uncle Kenny and cousin Jeremy. Let me just pull the tab up. But all you need to know is that Castnet Seafood is the name of a seafood place here in New Orleans. So Castnet Seafood for Uncle Kenny and cousin Jeremy. According to the local news station, the blue crawfish is a rare thing to find, yet it watches us from the tank of the market, spared from a boiled, seasoned death, unlike its red friends. My uncle says joy is the opposite of running into a dagger, and I realize I am not the most poetic family member who has pain. Jay and I crack the spines of the crawfish not lucky enough to be blue. The deeper the blues, the more I see black played above my head at the chiropractor the day before. Stubborn, I call my back. Subluxation, the medical journal says. 3 times a week, my chiropractor calls the forceful moving of my misalignment a healthy crack. Like bullies hemorrhaging power, we look forward to making me almost break. I love my family, unlike my back. Before we got here, Jay threaded amber and jade and lapis into a necklace he made for me to match the cover of the book where I've written my pain. He moves outside his box, newly freed. He loves movement, says he understands that toxic masculinity means to want to pinch your claws around any smaller crustacean. I am the third most poetic in this family. He loves the neon of the crawfish. We Google what makes it blue and we suck the sadness out of our conversation. Like luck, blues can spare any life if you wear it, but it will leave you as the bug came from. Were they a proud bunch? Had the brightest shells in their swamp? Did this little blue bug love his looks? Or did he burrow deeper into the mud because he couldn't handle the attention his hue attracted? We chew the back meat of the unlucky things, stew in a love that surrounds us like a pot with our spines and heads still attached. Look at what the brain makes the muscle do. Remember, joy is the membrane covering us, the tissue that keeps a family situated around the table when they could be running from one another. My uncle taps the murky glass to make the orphan thing move. He turns to us. Could you imagine us living like that, all hard on the outside with an exoskeleton? No, I can't. There's so much in us, we'd fall apart. Thank you, that is that poem. I'm gonna read another new poem. So I also consider Katrina my villain origin story. We are a lot alike. So this one, I think a lot about water. I mean, you have to, especially being from New Orleans, and how water is used to, help sustain you and keep you alive, and how we're made up of water. We need to drink a lot of water, but also it can drown you. And so going to school, I went to college and I got my MFA in New York. So it was very different, being in the North. And I was thinking about this, especially when I moved back here, when I started teaching at Tulane. And I took a walk with, he's like my best friend. I call him my twin because we have the same birthday. His name is Maurice. So I was thinking about that. Like when I came back home, I couldn't write a poem for a long time because I felt like the distance away from New Orleans gave me more of a freedom to write about it. So this one is dedicated to Maurice, but it's called, I wrote all my good poems in New York. I tell you, as we walk the trail in Oxford, surrounded by the trees I don't have names for. They hang over us like unpredictability, like life. I don't have a name for this, but I've tried calling it several things. Limbo, an unnestling into a familiar strangeness, unpaved streets. I'm afraid my hands work better in the cold. I mean, I think this is how destruction starts. You return. You're non-adaptable, harder to move, The ground sinks, the water rises. I think too much of them. I mean, we've all once seen what we think shouldn't be there. A weapon shadow that turns out to be the refrigerator, a shirt hanging from the door, the toilet in its same spot, gurgling like a victim, so fierce swollen, it's real. I love where I'm from. Religiously hunker in the belly of a tub during rain-filled summers like a stowaway. It took 5 hours to get here. We should have switched drivers when the accents changed, talked about what soothes our mothers. Blood is such a flimsy marker of kinship. The highway was a spine leading the way to the borrowed brain of the house we visit like an earworm. The cicadas call us from the noise we have no name for. We know things are wrong. We've listened too much. The land, like us, will one day be gone. Right now, let's pull the black card on nature. We deserve to be here. We cut the horsetail like troubled siblings, construct our own names, unchristen the smooth-barked crepe myrtles. Damnful clergymen. Look at us. Once before, we trusted poisonous things because of their beauty. Angel trumpets, the stones of cherries, ourselves. I think I'm gonna start reading from the book now. This one is definitely a Katrina poem. It's called Things That Fold. It's after Jamal May. The poet Jamal May has a poem called Things That Break. So, Things That Fold, after Jamal May. My father's voice after the cancer has spread, a flip phone, a flag, George Bush's hands as he pauses his vacation briefly for thoughts and prayers. My body next to the potted plant after my father throws the wooden chair, a cheaply made chair, a small stack of clothes, a birthday card, Milvertha Hendricks under the American flag 2 days after Hurricane Katrina, her face from the crease made in her obituary photo as we use the newspaper to eat crawfish, the wrinkles in her forehead, floodwater passing through a broken levee, my uncle's hands retaping the attic windows after the floodwater rises, my cousin sleeping in the attic because no neighbor has a rescue boat, Black people in distress. We lay prostrate and call it prayer. The blankets on my cousin's shoulders days later when rescued. The National Guard smiled as he carries the neighbor's dog from the flooded living room, the dog's body around his neck, an upside down flag. I also have a grandma poem. It's called Prelude to Separation. It's for the dedication. It's for my grandmother and her many names. All of my cousins, we all had different nicknames for her. Her nickname was, I called her Boo Boo. My cousin called her Bootsy, but her name was Helen Robinson. Helen Valentine. So, Prelude to Separation. This is the type of weather we lose matriarchs to, but don't yet know. We will unfurl the rollers from her hair when we find her, stroke the blue suede of the casket before she is lowered into the brownest part of the earth. There will be no headstone. There will be nowhere to sing. There is something vulgar in our freedom. Months later, when we escape the city and storm to Mississippi, we cannot bring her. God does not slap the ground. The audacity. He won't break it open. This one, I mean, we're talking about water and destruction, but I always say that, oh, I forgot to wear my pen. I'm going to show it to you. I made enamel pens when I was promoting my book. So I made little poetic licenses. So if you want to buy one, you have the poetic license to emotionally devastate, because all my poems are sad. So this one is, it's another Katrina poem. It's called What's It Like Escaping Something Trying to Kill You. A minister blames this on the slaughter of unborn children. We enter a tunnel and my breath holds itself for comfort. My father suggests we find a copy of the Green Book and pray over it. A car full of Black people driving past Confederate statues. A strawberry zooms past my left ear. The wind smashes it against the bark of cedar. A fish drowns itself in the Mississippi. The one-eyed tabby is not allowed in the hotel. He too will float, but in a different city. 3 Ritz crackers on a paper plate. There was a bush separating the hotel from a supermarket. The president tries to separate himself from responsibility, but we see him too. Put those back. You're not wearing hand-me-down underwear. I eat lifted grapes. You call it stealing. Adults call it building credit. Don't you know I don't know where we are? What to do in a country that never wanted me here? Did you hear the one about God? I am blamed for laughing the hotel room into an awkward silence. My aunt sleeps, deaf as hands in the dark. 2 hurricanes in the same week. Such sororal horror. Looking at time. Which one am I going to use? I think I wrote a book, which means I have a table of contents. I should probably go there. Similarly, I would always like have papers in my hand. I'm like, oh, I have a tangible thing to hold. It's always such a cool feeling. Okay. This one, the title of my book is called I'm Always So Serious because I have about 5 poems in the collection with that same title. And I'm going to read one of them. It's the first I'm Always So Serious poem in the collection. I don't know if anybody, if you have been in New Orleans, if you go on St. Charles Avenue, it's like these lines of like these big, beautiful mansions, and it's close to Ottoman Park, and it's also close, to the universities. So it's a very, it's very beautiful, but knowing what we know about how most wealth is achieved, especially in the South, they're beautiful mansions, but this whole area used to be a sugar plantation. So this is called I'm Always So Serious. Which is to say, in the winters, I dream of owning a multi-floored mansion in New Orleans, specifically one on St. Charles Avenue with a wraparound porch and white pillars that would only see the likes of me if I were the maid, the midwife, the family mechanic, Archie Manning, the maintenance worker, or the mailman trusted enough to know the gate's 9-digit passcode and leave the mail resting on the family's rain-weathered mahogany rocking chair. In this particular dream, I'm the mailman. The marigold's red tongues lick the legs of the chair as I leave the mail on one of its non-refurbished lead-painted arms. Their green necks rapidly invade the eggshell-painted porch like any poor soldier in need of his salt. I rip one from the ground for the sake of killing, look it in its yellow center, a vibrant blister, before I rub it between my knuckles and render it a freshly ground thing. Looking back, this poem was only supposed to be about my sinuses, how, even in my dreams, I sneeze at the sight of untended weeds, flowers whose mouths unfold under the brazen light of the sun. The nightmare is supposed to be my allergies, how they only allow me to love what blooms from a distance, but in every dream, those vibrant marigolds keep growing. Their vines are needle-thin tumors that keep stretching crazily onto the porch, keep making the rocking chair nervous at its own home. When I see that rocking chair, I see blood. It rocks like a heartbeat running from whatever is inside that mansion or behind it with a whip. I think I'm gonna read 2 more poems and then I will get out of your hair. Maybe that one. Not that one. I don't think out loud before or ever. So yes, I'm gonna read 2 more poems. This one is called CJ Pete Magnolia 2004. So just for clarification, if anyone's ever heard of the Magnolia housing projects that was in New Orleans, a lot of, especially rappers from like Cash Money, lived in the projects, but after hurricane, and also that's where my family is from, my family grew up there, but after Katrina, they tore it down It was one of the few like buildings that really withstood the storm. It wasn't really damaged because they were made out of strong brick. And I remember, especially when hurricanes would happen when I was little, we would all go to my grandmother because she still lived there. And it was one of the safest places to be during a storm. But the city decided to tear it down, and now it's an apartment complex. So this is CJP Magnolia 2004, and I dedicated it to Miss Sherdell V. Washington, who's a family friend. I tried to do this thing where I was trying to make a mini documentary about friends and family that lived in the Magnolia, but it never was complete. So I decided to turn it into a poem. So the dialogue, even though you can't see it, is her dialogue and it's italicized on the page. So CJP Magnolia 2004. Bless the children who are compared to the white ones. Praise the project bricks and the men inside selling white ones. I know Rodney wanted to be a chemist, but they said, fuck that, and didn't let him graduate. Bless our rivals in the Calio, the unloved children inside its walls, and Calliope for allowing us to butcher her name. Bless every accent that flies out of a child's mouth. God bless the child that's got his own. Bless every child whose favorite flavor is red and pays 25 cents for the crimson ice that stains the tongue. The syrup oozes down the lips of a toddler who has just learned to curse. We make the magnolia bloom. The church is a church, but it's not a church unless the people is in it. We are midnight children inside its walls, the black ink they cannot wipe away. Bless the children raising their mother's children and every child who has felt the bite of a belt. Praise the child who does not cry when getting beat in front of their friends. See you? You have the courage to get cocky. It won't go through, baby. It won't happen. I don't know of any dumpster in a magnolia that hasn't been turned into a casket. Do you know how many bodies have been thrown away? And then this last poem, it is a golden shovel. So I can't really see, but it spells out "We Real Cool" by Gwendolyn Brooks. It was a form invented by Terrence Hayes. This one isn't particular. Well, I mean, the poem can be about whatever you want it to be. I'll just say that. It has water in it. So it's another one of the I'm Always So Serious poems. It's the Golden Shovel. All the continents now pulled apart by Earth's knowledge of us. We are a silent choir of buzzing in different hemispheres. A knife cuts at our combs and the both of us reel back into our honeys. I know we both cool and warm the floors of oceans with our light. We, the carriers of our lungs, could have moved to any country you wanted, left the land of greedy mouths and childish things to tore every blade of wheat and build a school for our troubles where we teach them to sleep. We, the unalarmed and unconcerned for anyone who isn't us, show the children how to breathe in the hours of lurking, break open the eggs of robins and prepare breakfast late. Here, give me the gun, and I'll blade open the head of a coconut so we have the meat of something worth striking. Never having to explain to your parents and set the story straight. Who are you to step into grief and not apologize? 23 and human. Listen to us. Me tough and you good. Sing with all our teeth and then softly, like the spot on an infant's head or anything else sin can create. Of course, weariness is a wire in reason. Of course, we'll all disturb the earth at the end of our thin lives when called and begin our stay in the ground. Weeping, the cicadas buckle their ribs into a tremendous jazz and give me another reason to hate June. But there is now winter on the leaves, and we are aware of that the arrival of everything unsteadies you. Your body not yet heavy with dew. The air not yet birthing the inevitable monsoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Karisma. That was wonderful. I can't believe that I got invited. This is like a treat for me. This is the best part of my day. I'm so happy. And I'm especially happy to be introducing our next and final reader, Ashia Ajani, whose debut book is coming out next week. You can pre-order it on all the platforms. It's called Heirloom. It's wonderful. Ashia is also a dear friend of mine. And so feels like just yesterday. We were little babies in college. So official bio time. Ashia Ajani is a sunshower, a glass bead, a carnivorous plant, an overripe nectarine hailing from Denver, Colorado, Queen City of the Plains, and the unceded territory of the Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapahoe peoples. Ajani is a lecturer in the African American Studies Department at UC Berkeley and a climate resilient schools educator with Mycelium Youth Network. A BSF Award recipient, Ajani has received fellowships from Just Buffalo Literary Center, Tin House, The Watering Hole, UC Berkeley's Poetry for the People Climate Activism Residency, and the Milkweed Hub Chrysalis Institute. Ajani is co-poetry editor of the Hopper Literary Magazine. Their writing is a kaleidoscope of their work as an eco-griot and abolitionist, and their debut poetry collection, Heirloom, is forthcoming next week with Right Bloody Publishing. And I'll hand it over to Ashia.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Irene, Karisma. It's like was just so freaking cool to like hear you read. I actually had like the similar experience as Irene when I saw the crawfish poem. I was like, oh, I need to just everything. I need to like get into it. So thank you for being you. It's a really like truly an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you folks at Brooklyn Rail. And of course, thank you Irene for making this happen. This has been such a delightful experience. So I had a set list prepared. I'm gonna make a couple of adjustments just because I feel like so much of our work is in conversation with each other. And I wanna like particularly highlight some of these poems that I think are also in conversation, or I guess like more direct conversation with each other. A little bit about me. So I am originally from Denver, Colorado. I currently live in Oakland, California, which is the unceded territory of the Ohlone people, but I was raised by my grandma from Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi, real country stuff. And I oftentimes, what a lot of people don't realize too, is during like Black Exodus, during the latter half, Denver, and then Richmond, California were actually two really big hubs where a lot of Black people relocated to. And so I think of these cities very much as extensions of the South. And I think you'll see that a little bit in my work. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into this first poem. It is called, I Still Won't Get My Hair Wet. The cold water will swallow you whole, child, and where will you be without this landlocked abandon? Grandma chides when I venture a new baptism. She snaps on my swim cap tight enough to knock these perm bruised edges loose. The chlorine clean makes it pure enough for plunge. My lungs fill with chemicals. We buy back our health, a purloined possession. This kind of thirst summons an ancient lust. We've been parched for centuries. In secret, I seek to swim, cloaked by what carried and buried my bloodline. I am hot-blooded, over-eager to splash and cool off. Growing up in Colorado, I never was a water-connected person. Besides, my bloodline lacks proclivity towards moisture, though these lungs know nothing but flood. Years ago, in the wild edges of Missouri, my paternal grandfather throws my adolescent father into Smithville Lake, shouts, swim. If they come for you, you better know how to float. If they come for you, you better hold your goddamn breath. So that's I Still Won't Get My Hair Wet. And as someone who really does enjoy swimming, I feel like there's oftentimes a lot of like trauma still around like Black folks in swimming. And I remember like not really being, it took me a long time to learn how to swim, and technically I still don't know how to swim. I like can keep my head above water because my like family like kind of refused to like for us to be around water. If we were to go somewhere, it was just like, okay, we're gonna like barbecue, we're gonna like chill on the beach, but nobody's really gonna get in the water. So I don't know, I see like a lot of these kind of cascading effects. But I also, you know, I'm like as you get older, you know, you like repair your relationship to a lot of stuff. So this next poem is called Do Rag. All of the poems that I'm going to read are from my forthcoming collection, which comes out on next Tuesday, which is very exciting. This is Do Rag. Forward moving, we always turn back time. Like ocean, built of body, memory. The god of good grease paints follicles holy, and those waves, Lord, those ancient waves, facilitate a brother's boldest baptism, wipe me down, a litany of all the good that came to stay. The Atlantic remembers every part of Black anatomy. Like a curse, a calling, those cold waters shift and stagnate under a cotton polyester blend. They never got to lay claim to the water, but by God, how they damned, privatized, seized, overfished, extracted, deregulated, poisoned, commodified, pulled the cloth from the crease quick, like a run in a stocking, ripped the color clean from scalp. An instantaneous divide reminds what can be taken and what can be absolved. Later, a Black boy will fit his mouth around the word rage, hold it behind his tongue, ferment his brooding into savage. Watch him pull bones from the riverbed, casting wide mesh drenched in cotton coagulations. Pray for summer rain to rinse all these trifling transgressions clean. Any flood breaks a bullet's back, but does not siphon the blood back into body. Baby, I can't help but enshrine you as a vengeful sea god, drowning in all that drip, all that wet, all that sheen. So this next poem, I have like many feelings about this next poem because it just brings up a lot of like emotional stuff for me. This poem is a tribute to Ahmaud Arbery, who was gunned down by white supremacists while he was out on a run. And I wrote this very much like during kind of like peak lockdown, as I was thinking about how cool it was that so many people were like reaffirming their relationship to the outdoors and to nature, because that's what we could do, you know, during peak lockdown. We could be outside, we could go running, we could be in nature and commune with nature. And then to have a reminder of what it's like being Black, being perceived as Black in nature. It's really fucked up. So yeah, a lot of feelings for this next poem, but this poem is called Running. Once again, I return to the outdoors in search of cleaner breath. My lungs, a peripatetic duo foraging for whatever fills, collapses, or relieves. In the South, breath is heavy. Humid palpitations mark this flesh ripe for taking. This exhalation is not cheap. The flight in these legs, a vestigial burden passed down generations of restlessness. We stay moving. It is harder to kill a thing in constant motion. I say no names for fear I will summon something wicked. I do not look at what hunts me. Rather, I embrace the freedom of exodus. When one of us runs, the rest follow. It is an unspoken bond of reluctant prey. You would think with everyone trapped in their houses, the predators would take a break. Even Jesus got one day of rest. 2 bullets hunt and run behind me. The asphalt loves this body too much for return. Whiteness rewrites my breath into blood, into ash. Self-deputized by whatever golden emanations they deem worthy of judgment, these violent beasts reclaim open space that was never theirs to covet. My feet shift with a sole desire to mind my business and keep it pushing. My heart, a rustle in the wilderness sought for horrific consumption. I do not want to be surveilled. I just want to feel the cool air wrapped around my Black body and for once, feel free to exhale. So that's Running. This next one is probably my favorite poem in the collection. It's called Life Cycle. So very much in kind of like in line with some of the themes that Irene and Karisma were talking about in terms of expendability and waste and survival. I think a lot, I mean, my background is environmental justice, and so I just spend a lot of time reading about how America, and even not even just domestically, but internationally, has poisoned so many people. And so this is kind of a poem, an accumulation of that, and thinking and interrogating and wrestling with that. America is a factory. My father builds security cameras from discarded junk phones. Their cracked screens, a subterranean stained glass, burgeoning blessings. Come one, come all if you dare. He welds a fine line between surveillance and security. My father is no stranger to a gun. My father believes in a self-proclaimed rapture. The hills have eyes. My father's lenses thicken as his vision defers. At the end of the world, he hopes to patent his despair. America is a landfill, underwater bloodline brined, it's soured. My neighbor pours the leftover liquid from a pot of greens into his garden, billowing green stink arises, stains room for ripening. Black folks despise waste. The last drops of crown peach in the dog's water bowl for taste. The plastic bags under my auntie's kitchen cabinet, exceptional cushioning for our endangered shadows. Never afforded the softness of packing peanuts. Is the soul biodegradable? Can it be upcycled? At least we still have Granny's house. Wrap your apparitions in polyester coves, send them out to ocean. May they forever exist in sedimentary purgatory, floating on. In this sense, we never rest. In this sense, pollution profits. Won't these white folks come and pick up the damn trash? America is a false idol, all my people iconoclast. Look out the window at all of that. Goddamn, what is he protecting? Ain't nothing here ours but scraps of metal. Melted all down, why don't you? Some homes are worth less than their copper pipes. This metallic stew pot boiling over. My ancestors bartered their gold teeth for green, earned heart disease and curdled cream dreams instead as the planet warms another degree. Mama says my degree won't save me. Suppose cash really does rule everything around me. I wonder, what rich bones can broth a new vanguard? America is a malignant tumor. Oh, how I long to capitalize this intrusion in our collective heartbeat, beating away at the floorboards of good sense until the spirits rattle around, pushing daisies, memory stinging nettle unsilenced. Watch the good earth reclaim clunkers for cash. Nostalgia makes a mockery of present. The open-faced sores on my uncle's knuckles attribute to this nation's success. I won't bullshit you. He reeks of burnt sienna and ember. It all reeks of pyrated pyrite, fool's gold. I talk too much about my grandmother's hands because they threshed this country. Great migration granny built Ford tough. Gorgeous ghost gnarled into graphics. Look closely. You can see flakes of calluses soldered to your car's lithium battery. I talk too much about my grandmother's hands because they became cracked by bleach, ammonia, everything meant to whiten and purge bacteria. She passed down her genealogy of anguish, lead-hardened blood, black lung coughing up embattled blues. Wasn't the Tin Man once chopping through scorched earth too? My gut is filled with vengeful microorganisms. Today and every day beyond grief, I throw my grease against any surface in need of shine. America, define yourself a country exactly. My offering, a knotted bellyache of sadness born beyond a destined horizon manifested. The embers of our lost selves tumbling across the West Coast. Even the mountains seem to collapse with sadness. The spine of the uninherited earth curved like that of a funeral wailer. An assembly line aggravating access. All that rust corroding our good sense. Riddle me this. How can I be well when my lawn is always burning? Yeah, so that one is like kind of like my favorite. It went through, it used to be like 3 pages longer because I was going in, y'all. I was just mad and I was like writing. I had to cut down a lot of it, for it to make the book, but who knows? Maybe it'll turn into an epic poem one day. Because I got a lot to say. So this last one, actually I'm gonna do 2 more. They're shorter. So this one kind of takes us back down. I'm gonna rewind. So the book itself starts very much like in the South, and it kind of like maps my family's trajectory: South, Detroit, Denver, and so kind of like thinks a little bit about like, the the necessity of migration, forced migration, migration of your own volition. But we still have a plot of land that I've inherited from my grandmother. My grandmother passed away a few years ago. And nobody's really there kind of like taking care of that land because we don't really know what to do with it. And there's like this guy who lives in the plot next to us, and he keeps like moving his fence a little bit over, thinking that we won't notice. So this is very much like a poem about that. It's called In the Thicket. Weeds are flowers, George Washington Carver. In white imagination, Black folks exist as entertainers or boogeymen. Like my grandmother, I wish to make a mean life of both tar baby and briar patch. At once the same, occasionally one or the other. Somewhere between fascination and fetishization lies the shapeshifter's gift. Girl boy speaks their fragmented speech and the chatter of gulls knocked clean from sky echoes. Someone once said I need to culture my tongue, so I turn to the wisdom of evening bats, erudite in their echolocation. My mouth twists in praise-laden mimicry of another in-between species. Behind the loose bark of whatever forest remains, or sheltered by blackberry vine, its unwelcoming claws a demarcation against encroachment. Weeds overtake Granny's plot long before a white man can move his fence a few inches every summer. Prickly bodies hide man-made borders. We are, after all, connected by our bitter-rooted histories, the same strange flower emerging year after year from bulbs of empire, poisonous with their long memories. Some things are just Black folks' business, the rest, a fable. I think actually I'm going to end there to build up a little bit more intrigue for the book that is coming out on Tuesday. So if you like what you heard, you can hit that pre-order button. But thank you so much for having me, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this conversation.
Yeah, we got a few minutes left. I had a question brewing when you logged on, so I'm really excited to ask it. So thinking about being away from the South and writing about it, sensorially, like Karisma, when you were in New York, Ashia, being in Denver or in the Bay, what do you do in your writing process to like immerse yourself back in the South when you're writing about it? One of the poems I didn't get to read today it's an ekphrastic poem based on Frank Ocean's Pink and White, which I just listened to on repeat until I started crying and then eventually wrote a poem. But I feel like music is for me like one of the ways that I go back. But I would love to hear what that process looks like for both of you.
I'll go first if you don't mind. It's so funny because we all need to hang out in person. I have, like one of the poems in my book starts with a line from Frank Ocean, from Higgs by Frank Ocean. Oh, y'all are my cousins now. Anyway, the music, I mean, for me, I sort of mentioned it earlier. I don't know, going, New Orleans is such a unique place, and I didn't realize that until I moved away from it, because I would be explaining simple things and traditions, and my friends are like, what? Like, I remember I was in college and it was my 18th birthday. So instead of a birthday cake, my mom mailed me a king cake. And a king cake is a seasonal, it looks like a giant twisted like cinnamon roll with like the Mardi Gras colors of like these sprinkled sugar, like sprinkled sugar on top. Is like purple, yellow, and green. So they were like, what is this? Look, it's a king cake. And they're like, what is it? They were a little scared to try it. But a part of it is, music is definitely influential to me as well. I grew up, I call myself a field musician. I play the alto saxophone, and I like tried other instruments. But in the middle of my book, I have a couple poems dedicated to the piano player James Booker, who's a New Orleans legend. He was described by Dr. John as the best gay one-eyed piano player to ever come from New Orleans. With music, it's really grounding, and I use the blues as an arc, and I feel like because New Orleans has jazz and all these other wonderful genres, it just connects with poetry to me because we care a lot about sound, repetition, image, all of that. And if you think about them as like individual music notes, I feel like I listen to music the same way I write a poem. But to me, it was sort of easy writing away from New Orleans. I find it harder to write about it when I'm here, because sometimes I'm like, oh, well, do I have to write about it, or can I just look outside the window? You know, it's happening all around me. But I feel like I really needed that freedom and that distance to, not that someone was peering over my shoulder looking at what I wrote, but just that distance and relying on memory as archive. It's like, what do I remember that is specific to me, and then I can use as an extension of like the self and the I, the speaker in the poem. I don't know, to me, maybe it's just me, but to me, it's just easier writing about it when away, because I had to rely on, like, it was really important to think about memory and witness.
Yeah, I really love what you said in terms of like memory as archive. I spent a lot of my summers in Mississippi with my family members, or in Georgia. My uncle has a dance company in Georgia, so I spent like a lot of time in Georgia. And obviously like Georgia and Mississippi, two very different places, almost kind of like how like, you know, like New Orleans, like in Louisiana. I think even just like thinking about that, I hate when people like homogenize the South, because everybody like in the South has like such different experiences. And so like, you know, being in Mississippi, harnessing, activating kind of all of those childhood memories. I write a lot about childhood memories. Some things that like when you're a kid, sometimes you don't really process until you're older, like, oh wow, that was actually kind of dangerous. That was actually kind of like, that could have been like a really bad like racist encounter, you know, like, and just like thinking about like the I guess innocence, ignorance maybe of childhood, but then also being able to hold that with like the things that you know now, and tapping back into the magic of like imagination, of childlike wonder. I very much deeply associate the South with that, just because so much of my experiences were like, you know, being a kid, playing outdoors, like playing with dogs, meeting other kids, like playing pretend, things like that. But then also, you know, like I have family that I regularly speak to who live down south. And so I actually had a question, like, or I was trying to figure out how to formulate this question, because I just, Black vernacular is so poetic, like itself, like the way that we speak. And so I was like thinking about that, you know, some of like family members that like Irene mentioned, like Karisma that you mentioned. And so I carry that a lot with me. Some of those like poetic speaks, like, again, like my grandmother used to always say, all I got to do is stay Black and die. And just like, you know, I mean, a lot of us here are familiar with that, just with like thinking about how like that is just like a common way that we speak. And so carrying some of those memories, and then also speaking regularly with some of my older relatives, and music, definitely. I don't have a Frank Ocean poem, unfortunately, but I do have a Miles Davis one. And he talked about, especially in the creation of Kind of Blue, being back down south in Alabama actually was really formative for the creation of that album. And so I think oftentimes too about how like even musicians who are not living in the South draw so much inspiration from the South. I mean, even like in Denver, like I went to the Contemporary Art Museum with my mom last time I was around, because my mom still lives in Denver, and they had an exhibit on the Dirty South. Like I think that, you know, it's just like really cool to see how that sort of vernacular, that sort of like imaginary, but also like the activism and the resistance and the resilience that is coming from the South is like kind of translated over space and time too. So, you know, just being able to harness that in art, action, familial like narratives, things like that.
Yeah, I also want to make space for anything that y'all want to ask each other, because you are both very interesting people, and I'm sure we'll have very interesting questions. If you don't have anything, I can also ask another one, but just, you know.
How about you ask one more question, and then I can ask a question to y'all, so y'all can have a question.
Okay. I'm always curious about book titles, because I know Karisma also, there are 5 I'm Always So Serious poems in the I'm So Serious, Always So Serious book. So how did that, did you have like was it the 5 poems that happened, and then you're like, oh, since I repeat this title so many times, that should be the title of the book? Like, how did that genesis happen? And then Ashia, how did you come to the title for your collection?
Yeah, not at all. It had a different title. So it started out as this is a very revised draft of my thesis, my MFA thesis. There is a line, see, every time I think about the poem, I can't think of the name of the poem, but anyway, I do have a collection, it's like 5 poems called I'm Always So Serious. Oh, originally the title of the book was They're Always So Afraid to Bleed, because it came from a poem called This Is a Song for the Good Girl that's in the collection, but it didn't really fully encompass the entire themes of the book. So I'm Always So Serious came to be the title after the book was accepted by Sarah Ben Books, and I was talking to the editors and talking about different names, but those poems came about because people tell me I have a very serious resting face, which I probably do. I don't know. I don't pay attention to myself when I'm resting, but so people think I'm always, I mean, the poems are sad and intense, but people think I'm like that all the time. And I like to think I'm funny. I think I am, but so they started as tongue in cheek, and I was like, okay, I'm always so serious. I'm always so, and I like wrote a draft of a poem just to see. And that poem actually, the first poem actually did not make it into the book. The first I'm Always So Serious poem that's in the book is the second one I ever wrote. And it was much shorter. I love a good run-on sentence. And, you know, in school, I was told so much, you know, especially when you're writing essays or whatever else, is like, you know, these are long run-ons. You want to separate them into, you know, smaller sentences. And I remember bringing one of those poems to workshop and at NYU, and Terrence Hayes, who became my thesis advisor, he was my workshop teacher. He read the poem and he was like, why are you stopping yourself? You're talking about the South. You're talking about, you know, I have a line with the wraparound porch. He's like, make the sentences like a wraparound porch. Like, if you like long sentences, there's nothing wrong with that. And I was like, oh, so I tried a longer version of it. And I'm a type of poet who sometimes forgets that I can write multiple poems about the same thing. I always try to fit so much in one poem, which can work sometimes, but sometimes it can't. So, you know, I was talking to him about it because I was doing the final portfolio, and he was like, well, maybe there's a whole bunch of things. Maybe there's a whole bunch of reasons why you're serious, you know, investigate that. Why, you know, why do you think that is? So some of them are sarcastic. Some of them tend to be a little bit funny. I have one that feels almost dreamlike. So they're not connected. You don't have to read each one in order. They just have the same title. They're all about different things. And I love repetition. So I'm really intrigued on how they all have the same, I started with the same title, but I went into the poem knowing they will all be able to stand alone and weren't tied to it. So it became an exercise for me.
Yeah, I think for me, so much of my work is informed, so much of my poetry is informed by my work as an environmentalist and like vice versa. And so I was just like, I be feeling things, y'all, like about just like the state of the world. And I had recently, over the past couple of years, I've been like kind of coping with like a lot of some sudden, some like kind of like long time coming family deaths, and have been processing that, and had also just like been thinking about all of like the knowledge and all of the knowledge, both physical and like, I guess like immaterial, that family members, especially elders, could have passed on to us. Yeah, I will say this, like, as much as I can, like, if you have people who are getting up there in age in your family, like, talk to them, like, if they're cool with it, like, record them, like, you know, like, ask them about like their, like, you know, like what life was like, you know, if they're willing to share, because I feel like I missed out on so much. And so this book was very much a way for me to speak to them, but to also kind of like think about the things that I had already received from them, these lessons, these desires, part one. And then also like the other part was like thinking about environmental inheritance. I'm not super religious, but I mean, like, I did grow up in a Christian household, and the meek shall inherit the earth has always been something that I've been thinking a lot about, especially as it relates to climate change and environmental issues. And I mean, the poem didn't make it into the collection, but I did have a poem kind of interrogating that, like, but why though? Like, you know, kind of like, and you know, why are we here trying to like patch up everything that was not ours, that we like destroyed? So like these things are very much in conversation with each other as I was thinking about, you know, the concept of heirloom. What are you passing down? What am I receiving? And then what am I passing down? Like, what are things that I want to be passing on to future generations? And that very much was just kind of like, I was writing poems that had that question, that theme, thinking about, you know, like Black insurgent knowledge, thinking about Black environmental knowledge, migration, disruptions. And so, yeah, heirloom felt like what it needed to be.
Ashia, you want to close this? If you have the question, then you can ask it. If not, then we can call it for the reading. But do you want to close this out?
Sure. I was taking, because I'm a nerd, I was taking notes as y'all were performing. And I just wanted to kind of like, I mean, again, environmentalist perspective, just thinking about how, yeah, what your relationship is to like environment and nature writing. There's so many themes that are like through both of y'all's work, especially like the significance of ocean and the water, how that kind of like has evolved for you over time.
Yeah. The title of my book, aptly, is called Take Me to the Water. It's named after the Nina Simone song. But water, like, since I started writing, like, metaphors about storms and waters and rivers have always kind of suffused my work. In part because, so Katrina hit when I was like 7 years old, 2005. Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, where I grew up after Katrina, right as I was getting ready to leave for college. So it felt like my life has been shaped by water and water infrastructure. And to go back to your poem about like hair and like swimming, I cut off all my hair in November. And it's been the first time in my life that I can like, I'll be like I travel a lot for work, and I'd be like, oh, I can get in the hotel pool. I can like go randomly get in the ocean and I don't have to worry about anything for the first time ever. And so I feel like I'm moving into like a new phase with water where I feel like much more free in relation to it. I feel like water has been something that like it shapes, in a literal sense, like it shapes the landscape, but it also shapes so much of like my life. And so it's definitely kind of the element that grounds a lot of my relationship to the natural world, as this thing that I feel like a deep spiritual connection to, and is a source of like enrichment and life, but also can be so destructive. And when it's also like thinking about like infrastructurally, like who is given access, who is allowed to rebuild with respect to like what the water has done and will do. So, yeah.
Yeah. For me, I feel like within this, you know, after editing and putting this book out, I feel like definitely, you know, the new poems I'm writing are more so based in nature. A lot of them dealing with water, in particular one because of Katrina, but also, like I mentioned in one of the poems, I have really bad allergies, so I didn't like to be outside a lot as a kid. Like I'm allergic to like grass, pollen, all that type of stuff. And as a poet, you know, I like, first of all, I'm learning now, I really like taking walks. And that's something I want to prioritize more in my life now, and being very active and moving around. I have a connective tissue disorder, so I do need to move around a lot, or else I get really stiff, and I'm more comfortable in motion than when I'm actually sitting or trying to relax. But as a poet, you know, when I would learn about pastoral poems, I would always think, oh, these poems, I didn't originally like the idea of a pastoral poem, because I'm thinking about, oh, all these dead white men like writing about like nature and oh, it's nice. And I'm lying in a hammock and things like that. And I'm just like, oh, where's I learned, oh, it's much more than that. It's much more than what I originally thought it was. And these poems can talk about, we associate nature with peace, but so many people use nature as a disruption, and how nature can be disrupted, whether that's by man-made disasters, natural disasters, and all these other things. And I'm really interested in how, first of all, nature is so much older than us and will always be older than us. So I want to learn from it. I want to just be outside more. I want to learn how to build things with my hands, because I feel like, I think too much and have anxiety. So I feel like I'm trying to learn more and be actively aware of what I'm learning from nature, if that makes sense. I just want to be more an active participant in it and learning more how to save the planet, because New Orleans is thought to not be here in the next, 20 to 30 years. So that, it's not, climate change is not a threat, it's a promise. So I'm just really interested in learning more about the ecosystem I grew up in and not being so afraid of it as much.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Ashia, Karisma. Thank you, Anselm, and everyone at the Rail for having us. I'm just so thrilled that I got to spend a little bit of time with you all and hear your lovely words.
Irene, excuse me, Irene, my allergies are killing me. Irene, I thank you so much for putting this together. I'm sorry I messed up your name early on. I forgot. There was an Irene, and as someone named Anselm, my name is bungled all the time. I'm extra sensitive. So Irene, thank you. And Karisma, thank you. Ashia, thank you. And congratulations on the book coming out soon. And I think all three of you have websites for people to go and find out more about what you're up to. The conversation and reading were both wonderful, and the recording will be up on the website for the Rail and on YouTube in the next day or two, most likely. So I hope everybody circulates it and listens repeatedly. And thank you so much, and I hope you'll come back sometime. And I guess, what do we do now? We throw the mic open and let everybody say hello and goodbye on the way out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you so much for having
Thank
us.
you so much. That was amazing.
So beautiful.
Yeah, that was incredible. Thank you so much.